So they were promoting and using communists who were actually wanting to get rid of our form of government as a stepping stone to world domination.
Today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will pledge with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. Henry Kissinger, Bilderberg meeting, Evian, France, May 21, 1992.
Here's why. All the hedge fund, all the bankers, all the marketing people, all the lawyers, everyone, all Davos man. To my last breath, we're going to hunt you down and expose it all, and we're starting with Kissinger.
In part one, we talked about Army intelligence now privatized, crisis actors and provocateurs, Roger Stone's relationship to General Jim Jones of Denology, and the NATO and Marine psychological warfare programs, and in this episode, you'll see Roger with Robert David Steele talking geopolitics.
We all know that you are acquainted with Robert David Steele, and there's a photograph of you with Robert David Steele.
Yes. Standing under a portrait of, is it Theodore Roosevelt? Yes, it's at P.J. Clark's restaurant here in Washington, D.C. And the picture is 100% authentic. We had a very pleasant dinner together. And we talked, global strategy.
I assure you, you are never going to look at Robert David Steele and those around him in the same way again. We'll be going into Steele's former job working psychological warfare and open source intelligence at NATO and Marine University, and his ghostwriting of books for none other than King of the Cherry Marines, General L. Gray of the United States Marine Corps. Wait for that one. Conversely, the Queen of Truth, Kay Griggs, will take us through General L. Gray and the NATO, Israel, and United States Marine Corps kill squads.
But that was Walt Whitman Rostow and his crowd. And he's a very dangerous man, because Walt Whitman Rostow is a communist.
Okay, then what capacity is he?
Oh, he was one of the wise men in Kennedy's administration. I think he was probably responsible for the movement that got Kennedy murdered. I believe it was an Israeli group which did it with some of these rogues.
She will also provide the final bits of the puzzle when looking at the communists in suits who came out of Germany post-World War II in Heinz Kissinger and the New Age communitarian smart Gulag kibbutz commander now at George Washington University, Mr. Amitai Etzioni, former Israeli military intelligence. He's going to tell you Americans all how to live in your UN smart city.
They actually promoted communists in the OSS, which was started by this William, Donovan. So they were promoting and using communists who were actually wanting to get rid of our form of government as a stepping stone to world domination.
But before all that, let's get back to Big Lenny's friends in the ecstasy, cocaine, and steroid dealing gay for pay world, a la West Coast Epstein style. With major connections to high-level Israeli first operators and intelligence operating out of California, home of Silicon Valley CEOs, and the planetary propaganda outlet known as Hollywood. When you understand all these connections, you'll understand how the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army managed to penetrate so deeply into the United States social, political, and economic fabric. You'll understand just who unlocked all the doors to the house and let them in. Come, let us attend.
You're funny.
Like I said, do you like my tail?
I was just going to ask you about people who have what different bodybuilders' jobs were coming up. Obviously, we know what your job was. So for the bodybuilders, and there were a lot of upcoming guys that were training there who wanted to like make it, so to speak. What were guys doing for a living back then? Because when I would go to California in the 90s, I said, you know what, I can't live here. No one works. I said, how am I going to live here? I'm going to be poor. I said, there's no work ethic here. What do people do for money there? aside from the possible the gay for pay that was going on.
We'll go into sexual compromise within the bodybuilding community and Arnold's legendary posing for rich gay men to pay his bills early into his career. This flows into the Epstein and Maxwell case. Remember those people? They seem to have disappeared from the airwaves a little. I guess Henry Kissinger's job was done and the deep state swamp creature network is back in line before the election. We can forget about Epstein and Maxwell and the implications for now. Maybe they'll prop it up again later. We're going to go into the Canadian Jewish brothers who started the massive bodybuilding business worldwide. Joe and Ben Weider. You probably never heard of them, but trust me, in bodybuilding, they are the legends. They created Arnold Schwarzenegger.
They're the Montreal men who molded Arnold Schwarzenegger into a bodybuilding champion and formed a fitness empire.
Joe Weider picked up a weight and from there went on to change the world.
In the world of bodybuilding, they are legendary. Joe and Ben Weider, founders of the Weider Fitness Empire. What started as a $7 investment in the 1930s has turned into a $500 million empire.
Joe Weider was born in 1920 in the Jewish ghetto, and he was a scrawny kid who got picked on a lot.
I took up bodybuilding because I was weak, frightened, did not have enough strength, and therefore I decided I want to buy a barbell set. But I couldn't find a barbell set in the city because practically nobody knew what a barbell was.
So I remember one day he came back and he brought this axle, from a train. He says, it's close as I can get to a barbell. I'm going to train with that.
My mother didn't like the idea because she thought I was going to be a bum.
It was just unheard of. So she thought that Joe was nuts.
Joe had been looking for a superstar to represent his magazines. So at the 1968 Mr. Universe contest, which was held in Miami, a 21-year-old Austrian kid was competing, and Joe took notice.
Joe cultivated this relationship and felt that this person was a real opportunity to elevate the sport.
He always would say, Arnold, I want you to be the best and the smartest bodybuilder of the whole world.
He wanted to move him over to the United States from Austria. Joe put him up in an apartment in Venice. He gave him something like $50 a week, some real small stipend.
He says, all you have to do is just train, train, and train, and beat everyone. He saw me like the Frankenstein and the guy in the lab that is creating.
Joe was in love with Arnold. He got the best prize in the world when he got Arnold.
We'll go into their empire's close relationship with Israel as fanatical Zionist Israeli firsters, and how that may well tie back into the Epstein and Maxwell effect. Ben Weider endowed what is known as the, quote, Ben Weider Jewish Community Center in Montreal, and also supported two Lubavitch institutions, a charismatic and sometimes controversial branch of Orthodox Judaism. He was an admirer of Lubavitch head Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, a religious leader who was a major force in Israel. Israeli leaders including Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Rabin, and Benjamin Netanyahu would often visit him when they were in the US and seek his advice. A widely revealed but controversial leader, Schneerson was held by some followers to be the Messiah. Less widely known is the fact that he made statements that Jews are a different and superior species to non-Jews. And that's a quote. You see where we're going with this. They also brought Arnold Schwarzenegger to America. Anecdotally, I remember reading in a Joe Weider commentary in one of his magazines in the early 1990s that Arnold would bring him to tears joking about the Holocaust. I was perplexed by that commentary back then, and I'm still perplexed about it now. We'll go into Guru Amin and how, at the tender age of 19, he had a close relationship with Roger Stone when they met in a gym in Washington, D.C. back in 1994. At that stage, Amin was training a well-known high-level Democrat who's unnamed, I might add, and several liberal journalists at the tender age of 19.
That's when I met Amin, calls himself Guru Amin. He was 19 years old. It was 1992.
Right.
He worked out at a gym where I worked out. Ironically, he was training a very well-known, prominent Democrat. He was training a couple of reporters who I think we would call liberal.
We'll go into his close relationship with the senior chief of military medicine at Bethesda Naval Hospital, just across the road from the National Institutes of Health, and how Amin was given, for free, a pallet load, literally, of hugely expensive human growth hormone, which costs a fortune, to test on bodybuilders to see the effects.
At that, way back when I was a teenager, I knew the senior chief of military medicine at Bethesda Naval Hospital. I was getting growth hormone before anyone in the whole world was, when it was first 192 protropin and then 191 bihumatrope. The Bethesda Naval Hospital is the president's hospital, and right across the street from it is National Institute of Health. Between these two places, no drug goes anywhere without it being there first. They had 600 bricks of humatrope, and I was friends with her. He literally said, "Here's the paperwork. We really don't know how to take it. What do you think? How do you use it?" And that immense amount of paperwork, which was the equivalent of a couple of law library boxes, ended up being condensed into a pamphlet. They left quite a bit out, and some of the equations that I know have never been seen. And so that this is why I understand a much deeper way that growth hormone works on the human body.
Why was this 19-year-old given this? What the hell was he doing hanging with the head of military medicine? Who introduced 19-year-old Guru Amin Ali to the senior chief of military medicine at Bethesda Naval Hospital? Well, most likely it was Richard Greenbaum, whose wife Jennifer used to train Roger Stone's wife, Nadia.
And Richard knew a lot of other bodybuilders, including myself, who was bodybuilding at the time.
He knew everyone, because he used to call me up and he would give me like the gossip. He knew every little, he was like a pre-Chad, before Chad. He knew every little gossipy thing about everyone in the industry, and he was helping this one and that one and this person. He knew where the best growth hormone was and the best this and that. I don't know how he was so plugged in, you know?
Well, I mean, Richard and I talked on a regular basis, and we had a friend called Tom who was a go-between. We could talk about this, but, you know, Richard knew a lot about growth hormone and stuff.
All of these people were based in the Washington, D.C. area. Richard Greenbaum is the connection in this little web we are going to explore, all the way to experiments for super soldiers using steroids and growth hormone off the books for the US military. At any other time outside this crazy time we live in, the admissions by Guru Ali Amin would be a major investigative journalist piece. Please note, Guru Amin states repeatedly, everyone was blessed through the grapevine. Quote, everybody was blessed through the grapevine. What is this magical blessing grapevine?
And Richard, again, was a nice man.
He's dead now. He died of cancer just recently.
He died of colon cancer about a month and a half ago. Roger Stone's wife told me when I was down there.
Yeah.
Richard was on the inner circle of the people that had access to the humatrope. He was one of those people that, you know, you could say I blessed. You know what I mean? I'm serious, Dave. There were a few people that got their hands on this stuff. It was all coming through my friend. We would call him Doc, but I mean, the fact is that, and I don't want to get into this, but some of these guys were snitches, and they testified against him. He went to Leavenworth for 3 years.
Who did?
This guy.
Oh,
this
really?
Guy. Yeah. We'll call him. His name is Gary Riley. We called him Doc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, he was a senior chief of military medicine, and his wife ran the records. So, I mean, he said, I got 600 bricks. If you need, I'll get 600 more. One guy you competed against, he was also blessed through the grapevine. Willie, you know. There's a lot of people that were blessed through the grapevine. Craig also was being blessed through the grapevine, by the way. So everybody Craig knew for a while.
We're then going to go into Craig Titus, trained by the same Richard Greenbaum at the beginning of his career.
Las Vegas, Nevada attracts a dancer hoping to see her name in lights. But she discovers that Sin City lives up to its name, and fame comes at a heavy price. As beauty and brawn mix together to produce an explosive, wicked attraction. Titus gained weight, muscle, and respect, but at a price. He became addicted to performance-enhancing drugs.
One of the side effects of steroids is increased in aggression. There can be rage outbursts that are sometimes commonly called roid rage associated with steroid use. And there's no question that Craig's angry psyche, his tough guy, beat on your chest demeanor, was fueled in part by his steroid use.
Everyone who knew Craig in the bodybuilding world knew he was volatile, he was arrogant, he could be very cocky. A lot of his fellow bodybuilders just did not like him.
In Craig's case, I think there was a significant degree of narcissism. He really thought he was the one. He was the one who could be the champion. He's very involved with himself.
In his early 20s, he moved to California, where his career took off.
While Craig wasn't the best bodybuilder in the world, he was a very well-known bodybuilder, and that's because Craig really put himself out there and made a name for himself by just being flamboyant.
By 1995, Craig Titus's golden image was tarnished.
He was in a pretty high-profile bodybuilding contest, took second place, took the trophy and smashed it up and threw it on the ground and stormed off. That is very taboo in the bodybuilding world. You know, the one thing that you're always taught is to respect the competition. And here was Craig disrespecting the decision, and that really sealed his fate as the bad boy of bodybuilding. And Craig actually embraced that title.
Not long after the outburst, Titus was busted for dealing ecstasy and put on probation. Then, he was arrested for using anabolic steroids and sentenced to 21 months in federal prison for violating his parole. When Titus was released in 1999, he returned to the bodybuilding circuit.
This guy was a bodybuilding legend at the time in the 1990s. He murdered his personal assistant with the assistance of his then girlfriend. She had allegedly caught them dealing drugs, a lot of drugs. They had strangled her with wire, beaten her, tasered her, and burnt her body. Titus was dealing large amounts of ecstasy and cocaine in the mid-1990s.
He was very boisterous about his lifestyle, to the point where it was stupid, you know? Like, we got back to Kamali's room, and he started doing coke right there in Kamali's room. Lines of
right in front of you?
Lines of coke. Listen, I don't have anything bad to say. I'm just telling you the truth.
Right,
this is what happened, you know? And this is when I saw it. He whipped out like this much money.
Oh, wow.
To pay for a meal that costed like 2 pieces of paper, whatever increments it would have been.
Yeah.
20, okay? And no normal person would do that. Now, I'm young, but I'm not stupid.
Right.
So instantly I'm like, okay, drug dealer.
Right.
Drug dealer. Okay. Now, mind you, Craig didn't let people know he was a drug dealer at this time. This is 1994. Okay.
Sure.
Nobody knew about Craig Titus and dealing drugs at that point. Am I right?
I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that. You know. Yeah.
Okay. So this is crazy, but this is how all this shit ties in. And I don't think I've ever told anyone this, so here you go. We're all past the time where it's actually going to make a damn bit of difference.
Right.
So Craig puts me on the phone with some guy to talk to him about taking some gear and stuff. And that guy, I found out later, that guy was the guy that was setting him up, and that call was recorded.
Oh, no, really?
Craig had that, later on that evening, Craig had some friends come over. I come to his garage. He says, if you want to come see this is pretty cool. Now, mind you, I never once said this is crazy. I'm there. I'm young. I'm rolling with it.
Right, you're having a good time, I'm sure.
I'm having a great time. I mean, we're going to get into where he collected money in a minute because that was unreal.
Well, Craig is let's put it this way. Craig was a fun guy to be around. Don't get me wrong.
He was a really fun guy to be around. Now, I stopped hanging out with him, and I'll tell you why. And then I heard that things changed. But when I hung out with him, and when you in 94, early 95, that's when he was cool. Then he got in trouble. So it all stemmed from this. So the people that came to his house, they popped their trunk, and in their trunk, they had the large duffel bags, the very, very large duffel bags, and it was full of ecstasy. Full. I mean...
How many pills?
In the millions, but all the bags totaled up were in the millions.
Wow.
And then there were then at that point, I know there was only one other person that came by. That's it. One person came by. The majority of it was gone at that point. Now, the next day, we went to about 6 strip clubs. All of them were high-end. Mm-hmm. I just walked in with him. Didn't make a difference what we were wearing, but there was a dress code. We were in the VIP. He's doing lines off naked girls.
While he's prepping for the Nationals, right?
While he's prepping for the fucking Nationals. Yeah. This is all like right when I get there. I haven't even had a chance to really tell him, can't fucking do this, dude. This isn't going to work. Like, this is part of the program. And it gets good. So this isn't even the good part. It gets even better. So then Craig is picking up money from girls and, doing his thing, but he never missed a meal. And I never saw I've never seen anything like it to this day, that a person could do cocaine or be so physically addicted to it that they could do the cocaine and literally eat right afterward. And this was not shitty cocaine. I mean, the people he was getting the cocaine from, it glistened. I mean, it was like pearlish color. I mean, it was the real deal that people got in the 80s. No one had stomped on it or whatever you want to call it, because he was so high up in the ladder in the other game that he got the best of everything.
Sure.
And he had money, and that's what he more indulged in apparently than the pills that he was selling. So he got in trouble for that, and they never actually went through the process of sentencing him, or they put him on an extended period of time, the feds who arrested him, because all that shit was set up. I don't know exactly how it went down, but I know that was the initiation of all that bust, because he told me later what had happened. And then he went around the country setting up everybody he knew.
Oh, so he cooperated with them, so they never really arrested him.
Yeah, he cooperated big time, and that's when I stopped talking to him. Richard kept helping him. Him and Richard became good friends. And Richard and I stayed friends, but I didn't want to help Craig anymore. And this is why. At the Nationals, I helped him. I told him, listen, man, you can't do cocaine and get ready for a show. I mean, you can. I mean, apparently you can, but it wasn't part of my program. Okay?
Right.
Is the mysterious Richard Greenbaum involved in this? The same Greenbaum that we suspect introduced a 19-year-old Amin Ali to the chief medical officer at Bethesda Naval Hospital? We'll draw a real long bow and include major ecstasy and meth dealer Sean Atwood into the mix. He was at his peak in the mid-1990s at the same time all of this was going on in Las Vegas. He was in Phoenix, Arizona, just down the road from perpetual drug addict and Russian-Ukrainian gangster groupie John McAfee. Yeah, that John McAfee.
I'm John McAfee. I'm the guy that's accused of murdering the lead. His name is Guatemala. The FBI is going to be looking for him if you don't call him, sir. The FBI?
Atwood is now Johnny on the spot with regards Epstein and Maxwell, and had on CIA case officer Robert David Steele not so long ago. You remember Robert and his claim on InfoWars in 2018 that children were being kidnapped and taken to Mars as sex slaves.
This may strike your listeners as way out, but we actually believe that there is a colony on Mars that is populated by children who were kidnapped and sent into space on a 20-year ride. So that once they get to Mars, they have no alternative but to be slaves on the Mars colony.
What a great way to ridicule and drop a turd in the very serious issue of child sex assault and trafficking. But people just seem to accept it and move right along. I mean, this is, after all, the age of army intelligence, psychological warfare, flat earth theories and Q-drops, so we should expect that Robert David Steele would be able to get away with this in the age in which we live. Here is Robert David Steele recently with none other than arch-Israeli First Zionist scumbag Jerome Corsi. Apparently Robert David Steele is exposing the evil Zionist overlord Maxwell and Epstein's sex rings by hanging around with hardcore Israeli First Zionists, perhaps part of his cunning plot. And here is Robert David Steele with none other than Roger Stone. He has since removed the images from his site, but here's Jason Goodman asking Roger Stone if that was a real photo of him with Robert David Steele.
In the world of independent media, I'm here with Jerome Corsi and Roger Stone. Now, Roger, there are people who are spreading fake news, and I certainly don't want to ask you to disparage any of your colleagues, but we all know that you are acquainted with Robert David Steele, and there's a photograph of you with Robert David Steele standing under a portrait of, is it Theodore Roosevelt?
Yes, it's at PJ Clark's restaurant here in Washington, D.C., and the picture is 100% authentic. We had a very pleasant dinner together. We talked global strategy.
Yes, and of course my expertise in digital photography told me that, but I always like to get first-hand information from the source. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your writing and everything that you do.
Confirmed.
Confirmed. Thank you, Roger.
Joining any dots yet? Are you scratching your head yet? Are you going, How is it Robert David Steele has escaped any serious scrutiny this long? One thing I now know, Robert David Steele is 100% CIA case officer and a Navy psychological warfare specialist with deep ties to the United States Marine Corps and NATO. But wait, there's more. He is ghost-written for such infamous sexual deviant scumbags like General Al Gray, aka Papa Bear.
We are in the warrior profession. That's what we're all about. The people of our great land demand that we be special. They demand that you and I be part of the premier military organization on this planet.
You think they will be able to call you a Marine in a few
The Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, they mostly just call him Sir. Not bad for a former enlisted man, not good for anyone in the Corps who doesn't think America's 200,000 Marines should be the best and the brightest. There are those, some current and former Marines, who say they've not been that for some time. Al Gray is out to prove them wrong. If there ever was a man who believed in the axiom, shape up or ship out, it is Papa Bear. The Commandant is General Alfred Gray, Jr., who, as an idealistic 22-year-old from the New Jersey shore, enlisted during the Korean War as a rifleman in the Marine Corps. Since then, he's held virtually every field command a Marine can hold, and has treated his profession as practically a religious calling. General, I'm told that when you were commissioned as a lieutenant, you made a vow that you wouldn't marry for 30 years because you wanted to devote your life for those years to the Marine Corps. And indeed, precisely 30 years later, you got married.
Well, I don't know whether that's exactly correct. What we used to say when I joined the Marine Corps in 1950 is if the Marine Corps wanted you married, why, they'd issue you a wife.
Do you remember Al Gray as described by the legendary Kay Griggs?
General Al Gray. My husband was the chief of staff for General Al Gray, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps. And I probably shouldn't say this on the tape, and you all can get rid of it, but he's a homosexual.
Gray.
Gray.
Okay.
He's what they call a cherry Marine.
Here, this is 5 minutes describing Al Gray, sexual deviancy, orgies guarded by Israeli intelligence involving US military officers, drug trafficking, and the New York, New Jersey mob to which Kay attaches General Al Gray, a hero to the chipmunk Robert David Steele. Before we go on, let's read this from Steele's website. 1989, General Al Gray with Robert Steele on Global Intelligence Challenges. Now this is from Robert David Steele's own website. About the idea, historic contributions, insurgency, and revolution. Intelligence. General Gray was known as a warrior, but he was also an intelligence professional and unique among all the flag officers I have ever known, an inspiring educator. He created not just the Marine Corps Intelligence Center, but the Marine Corps University, new forms of informal research to empower younger officers and explore the edges beyond the conventional comfort zone. He was, in brief, a warrior scholar who epitomized all that should be good in our leaders. He also liked homosexual orgies too, but I presume Robert Steele's not going to put that in. In fact, maybe Robert David Steele could tell us all about some of those orgies. Could you, Robert? My chipmunk-cheeked little friend? You and General Al Gray? So this is a book ghost-written by Robert David Steele. Think about it. The closet homosexual General Al Gray, attending all those tailhook parties in Shellback. You remember that with Kay Griggs? Little chipmunk-cheeked Robert David Steele was in the same room with General Al Gray, for which must have been a considerable period of time as he ghost wrote his book. You must have alarm bells ringing in your head non-stop now, surely. Here's Kay Griggs on Al Gray, and this is only a small bit on Al Gray. Trust me, there's a lot more than this.
Now this term cherry Marine,
Cherry Marine.
That's a common phrase in the military?
See, the thing is, they're guys and they're girls, and I just came from such a real prudish culture.
Yeah.
That's
fine. You came from a normal culture.
And I'm not judging them, but the Vietnam War, I know a lot about that, about the MACSOG program and the Phoenix program, because George was involved with a very important part of that. Not important really, but he and Al Gray and Louis Buell, and it's run by the mob. Then it was a mob military partnership, joint. It was a joint operation in Korea and in Vietnam. The highest levels of the Marine Corps and the Army in those special operations levels, the individuals are actually in the mob. New Jersey.
You're talking about the mafia type mob?
I'm talking about the Brooklyn, New Jersey mob.
Roger's relationship with Cone was in part mentor. Cone had a slice of history and a circle of friends that would not have necessarily been part of our orbit. It's how we met Trump.
Donald Trump is probably one of the most important names in America today. Is, as I say, the closest thing to a genius I've ever met in my life.
I had a lawyer who was a very good lawyer, tough lawyer, named Roy Cohn. He introduced me at one point to Roger Stone. Roy thought Roger was a very tough guy. Roy knew some very tough guys, I will tell you that, but Roy always felt that Roger was not only tough, but a smart guy and very political.
Roger's the first one who introduced us to Donald, and Donald was one of our clients at Black Manafort Stone in the early 80s and was a client of ours for a long time.
My husband, Al Gray, Sheehan, they're all Brooklyn, Cap Weinberger. Heinz Kissinger, there's the Boston mob, which was shipping weapons back and forth to Northern Ireland. And I don't want to get too deeply involved in that, but it goes Israel, some of the Zionists who came over from Germany.
In der 1871 erstmals verkündeten Vereinigten Deutschen.
Henry Kissinger was a well-known, totally a homosexual, not even both ways.
And so his wife is a marriage of
oh, it's just a
convenience.
Yeah, and he might, maybe he's discovered women in his late age, I don't know. But no, I heard through a very well-grounded German that Henry's best friend's father told Henry to stay away from him, and that's why Henry left. The family were embarrassed, and Henry went to Britain where they did this, and then changed his name from Heinz to Henry. And I interviewed a man named Bob, who's an Army enlisted person who told me about Henry in Cambodia. So he, up through Cambodia, he was actually raping young men. And of course, that experience destroyed the lives of these 5 young men, according to the source.
So this is Kay Griggs back in 1997 describing her husband's boss. A quote, cherry marine or homosexual pretending to be straight. He is known as, quote, Papa Bear. A bear is slang for a butch gay man. Kay describes New Orleans and Miami, Florida as central to their operations. She describes the Vietnam and Korea eras and the partnership between the military and organised crime. Quote, the mob. You might want to find a few connections with Roger Stone and Donald Trump and co, mightn't you now? Roy Cohn? Ding? General Earl Grey and Kay's husband, Colonel George Griggs, were part of the Brooklyn, New Jersey mob along with Heinz Kissinger, now hanging in the White House as we speak. They were all into money laundering, drug trafficking, and secondary weapons sales. Kay mentions Earl Grey and a Russian, but never finishes her story. Maybe he was Chabad Lubavitch. They call New York Moscow on the Hudson, for good reasons. Watch video 48. Swiss bikies, Chabad Lubavitch, drugs, and Kay Griggs. In that video, she will explain all. Also video 11. Alex Jones admits Trump a product of US Army intelligence for the full flavour. Here's Kay talking in her own words, a short segment. You must watch her entire 1997 7-hour interview, linked below.
Colby, I spoke with personally on the phone. 2 weeks later, he was murdered. He went to Princeton. My husband knew him. He knew my husband. He told me, Colby told me that...
Now this is General Colby?
No, this is William Colby, who was head of the CIA.
Oh, okay, yes.
Who was murdered in a...
so-called boating accident.
I know exactly how that happened because, you see, the SEAL teams, SEAL Team 6, 4, 6, and 8 are on the East Coast, and then the odd numbers are on the West Coast. And some of the people who are affiliated with the SEALs, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say it, but...
Well, it wouldn't be hard for a SEAL to come from underwater and tip the boat over and make sure the man's dead, that sort of thing?
The Israelis train with the SEALs. They do a lot of wet ops, murders, over here. According to my husband, were... see, he works with those people. They do a lot of money laundering in the banks, cash transactions for the drugs that they're bringing over through Latin America, the Southern Mafia, the Dixie Mafia, which is now my husband's involved with in Miami. The military are all involved once they retire. They're, they go into this drug and secondary weapons sales. And before I forget, I want to find the name of this Russian who worked with Al Gray, who was my husband's boss, but that was Walt Whitman Rostow and his crowd, and he's a very dangerous man because Walt Whitman Rostow is a communist.
Okay, and in what capacity is he?
Oh, he was one of the wise men in Kennedy's administration. I think he was probably responsible for the movement that got Kennedy murdered. I believe it was an Israeli group which did it with some of these rogues. Walt Whitman Rostow was the one who got us into the Vietnam War because he wanted to sell the weapons and stuff. Walt Whitman Rostow went with Taylor, General Taylor, and wrote the report that got us into the Vietnam War. And all the time that the Pentagon was saying no, 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 he was a cheerleader for the weapons sales. He and Henry Kissinger, Heinz. He and Henry. Walt Whitman Rostow, Eugene Debs Rostow, these were communists, named for communists. Eugene Debs Rostow and it's either his son or his other brother, runs the big Boston mob, the port there. His name is Nicholas Rostow. With the Weld, with William Weld, they've done all that drug business in Mexico for years. They had that Russian, the one who was murdered by the assassin, Ramon. He was a competitor, Stalin's competitor. And
You don't think of Trotsky?
Oh, yes, you're right. Hey, oh, got it. This group, which was run out of Paris, is still being run out of Paris, this revolutionary terrorist group, which is controlling these Marines and Army Steiner's group. They all operate together. The man who started all of this program during Vietnam used communists who were in the Spanish communist movement. They actually promoted communists in the OSS, which was started by this William, Donovan.
Okay.
So they were promoting and using communists who were actually wanting to get rid of our form of government as a stepping stone to world domination.
Well, the model, let me be very frank. I have never been an aficionado of the Constitution. The reason for it, it's outdated. It will go on to Pence. From Pence, it will go on to Ivanka or Jared Kushner. And we will remain a viable country and a great country. I have no fear.
So this group now in the Army and in the Marine Corps has communists at the very top who are really, existentialist, which means they don't believe in God, they don't believe in Christ, they live for the moment, they believe in sort of one world which has no religions in it.
Right.
They're the ones who put Napoleon in power, they're the ones who put Oliver Cromwell in power, they're the ones probably who actually were behind the Roman Empire and maybe the Egyptian Empire. They put puppet people in power and they actually run it from behind the scenes. Now, Trotsky, as I understand it, was escaped from Russia. He had become a Christian, I understand, and was working with agents in the United States, Israel, and he was considered a threat. So he had to be silenced, killed. There's an excellent book which I have called The Mind of an Assassin, which is about the background of Trotsky's assassin, a young man named Ramon, who was trained, he was Soviet paid, I think he had experience in Spain. They organized it in Paris, I believe. And of course, up to the present time, there have been assassins operating out of Rome, Milan in particular, Naples, and Paris. And these are all anarchists, all mob related. They use mob funding. And of course, drug money to pay for the weapons, which are brand new weapons. The Bosnia Bazaar, this is the reason we had the war in Bosnia. The war in Bosnia is simply a stage to train assassins, to be a market for brand new weapons, to be a marketplace so that the drug money can be used. And the Army runs the whole show. It's totally run by the Army. The CIA is a bogus thing, you know. And Meyer Lansky. See, our mob, the organized crime, the Jewish Kabbalist group, who don't believe in God really. Well, they do. They look at God as a Kabbalah kind of thing, and the opposite of good is bad, and they have to get rid of all the good people and kill them, and then, you know, I mean, they really do this. They're killing people who are good on purpose, and they get brownie points with their little cult. Colonel Ron Ray writes about this. He's a Marine colonel who's a Christian who's writing about the Cherry Marines, the homosexuality in the group sex orgies and so forth. I mean, today in Naples, these orgies are going on. It was where Krupp, the weapons manufacturer, used to take the German high command, and they would go into the Isle, on the Isle of Capri, into the Blue Grotto. And they would have big orchestras, and they'd bring in little boys, little Italian boys, who would be raped. But what they were doing was pedophilia. They were raping, bringing in little boys. They involved the Catholic priests, you know, who were bringing in all, anyway. So, but what happened was, this whole group came over to the United States.
To my last breath, we're going to hunt you down and expose it all, and we're starting with Kissinger.
And they, it's an old culture, but it is the reason there are a lot of things going on with children these days. And it explains why it's all being covered up, because if you've got police officers who are playing these games and they're going in the woods like to, what is this place where, I mean, even Eisenhower played these games. Even Mike Kemp out in, it's called the Hermitage.
The Hermitage.
In California, where they all run, they get drunk and they run around nude in the woods and stuff.
Bohemian Grove. Kind of
That's
thing.
it, Bohemian Grove.
Okay, and rather than Hermitage, it's the Bohemian,
Bohemian Grove, that's the name of it. My brain's tired.
That's okay.
And the one in, there was a big one in Washington called Rush River Lodge, where they used to all go, and there are lots of places now. But the problem, as I see it, is that I think they're trying to destroy America and the basic Protestant Christian culture, because where you have a militaristic society, which is where the rules are only for those people, and keep in mind that Meyer Lansky and Luciano, Lucky Luciano, and the other man, they chose to go to Italy. Luciano went to Milan. He wasn't banished to Naples and Milan. The two top mob families went there because of the weapons industry. They're selling weapons. I mean, that's what the military is doing. It's totally controlled by the mob. Look at this. Weinberger was General Douglas MacArthur's. He spied on MacArthur in Korea. Who was MacArthur's nemesis? Albatross. It was none other than little old intelligence. I'm going to tell every move you make. Weinberger. Young, but he did it. He brought down MacArthur. Every move MacArthur was going to make, he broadcast it through the chaplain, his little intelligence network. And he got brownie points with the group because he brought down the big lion. When you get rid of a big lion like that, you get a big job. You've done good work. And they needed to get rid of MacArthur because he didn't want to keep the wars going. He wanted it over, and you know, it's like General Trofei, who took over after the Vietnam War was over, and he was on C-SPAN in August of '96 with former Ambassador Whitehead and a few of the other, the State Department Vietnam people. And General Trofei, he had been holding this in for years. He was on C-SPAN. This man let it all out. He said, I took over at the end of the Vietnam War. I was in control, right? Big general, charge. So I say, cut off the shipment of weapons. So I tell the Pentagon, cut off the shipment of weapons. He said, I got a phone call from Henry Kissinger saying, the weapons are going to continue at the wartime rate.
Sure.
Now, that's when all this stuff with China started. It started before then, because already the communist agents, the New York, Brooklyn, New Jersey mob, were already training Mao. Mao was trained in Paris. So was, you know, the one in Cambodia. What's his name? I can't think of his name. The one who was Pol Pot.
Yeah.
They were homosexually, bless their little hearts, by priests. They were wonderful little boys sent there, you know, turned, which is the word, you know, when they believe their mothers and then all of a sudden the world's horrible and then they have these wonderful friends who are going to make them leaders.
Yeah.
They're turned psychologically, and it's a pattern. And so this is why it's so important to know what they are doing to innocent little boys in the Army and the Marine Corps today.
So you get it now. Commies in suits and the bankers who fund them. Fund the think tanks, fund the universities, fund the drugs, launder the drug money, and promote the weapons sales. Compromise the generals and the military-industrial complex CEOs and high-technology CEOs. The long history of the likes of Rothschild's right-hand man, Kissinger, the other commie, the dialectic to Soros, both controlled opposition. The never-ending wars designed to keep us under the War Powers Act and various forms of executive and fear-based psychological dictatorship. The City of London banking and privatised intelligence network running through the communist training camps in Paris, the Bank of International Settlements in Bern, Switzerland, and the organised crime firebase known as Camp Israel, sitting right in the middle of the great pan-Eurasian superstate development, the Belt and Road, laying the technological infrastructure for total high-tech tyranny and data collection for the coming AI, robots, and drone 5G network, in combination with the UN Habitat Smart Cities program and the new ideological value system known as communitarianism that another European, French-speaking Jewish existentialist named Dr. Steve Pieczenik considers outdated.
Well, the model, let me be very frank, I have never been an aficionado of the Constitution. The reason for it, it's outdated.
Are you connecting the dots? Jared and Ivanka, the arranged marriage, City of London, Bill and Hillary clones, New York Jewish liberals posing as conservatives who will assist in the ushering in of the communitarian kibbutz program come 2028, just before the full-scale Agenda 2030 rollout. Right on schedule, right on cue, and the clown show circus can't wait to tell us their plans. They know we're just going to sit and click links all day, and there's no need to worry. But in the end, they aren't that smart. They've just got a lot of cash and a good narrative to feed the greedy online whores who pass for, quote, alt media these days. Do you think these people stopped at Operation Mockingbird and the mainstream media, forgetting the internet and what we call the, quote, alt media? They didn't forget. Let's keep it going. In part 3, we'll go into Robert David Steele and some of his little friends like Whitney Webb, Sean Atwood, and Dr. Kevin Barrett, and a bevy of alt media classic limited hangouts. We'll pass over Idiot Steele and his joke dress-up pantomime International Court to expose the cannibal, adrenochrome, infant, blood-drinking, satanic elite. And I mean, he is the most qualified, after all, to lead it because, being a former NATO Marine Corps psych warfare fake news specialist, cherry alt media star, of course he's going to lead that sort of thing. Of course he's going to take a turd in the punch bowl. And in the next episode, we'll also remind Dr. Stephen Pieczenik and Alex Jones of their previous comments on Jared Kushner.
We're bringing in Jared Kushner with the Steinmetz family and the Israelis and the Goldman Sachs boys. I've repeatedly said that Jared has to leave. There's no question he's involved in corruption with the Chinese. There's no question he's involved in corruption with the Israeli family, the Steinmetz, who were already indicted.
It will go on to Pence. From Pence, it will go on to Ivanka or Jared Kushner. And we will remain a viable country and a great country. I have no fear.
And ask a question. Have they co-opted Bibi and Kissinger? We should at least ask it.
Here's why. All the hedge fund, all the bankers, all the marketing people, all the lawyers, all Davos man. To my last breath, we're going to hunt you down and expose it all, and we're starting with Kissinger.
But I doubt the answer is the one we want to hear, but we'll ask it anyway. So stay tuned, and one final comment and correction. Several Special Forces affiliated personnel contacted me about claims of Alex Jones' friend Tim Kennedy being a former member of Delta or Combat Applications Group. They have stated emphatically this is not so. He is a former Green Beret. I went off the continued claims of Alex Jones from 2014 to 2016 about Tim Kennedy's past and super duper special operations he took part in. But then we are talking Alex Jones here. Anyway, I stand corrected. I'll see you soon for part 3 of 4. And remember, Patrick Berge.
If it benefits them to use Trump to hurt their enemies, they will use Trump to hurt their enemies. It has nothing to do... It's all very sociopathic. It's nothing to do with politics. It's all about power and profit. People got to get the politics out of their mind with this. Once you can accept that, it starts making sense.
It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today.